Hello.
What a surprise to see you here.
I know. Hello and welcome to, hey, how come I stopped sharing, didn't I? Yes. I'm just waiting for LinkedIn to catch up. Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. Good morning, wherever you are on the planet. Joe Rogers here, along with Kirsten Campbell.
So me, yeah.
And we're here to, today's topic is, or I should say, the topic every week is future of work, but there's always a subtopic because it's such a voluminous umbrella sort of Uber topic. Today's topic is what's been in the news last week, which is this incredible revolution of resignations. The resignation revolution is what Kirsten came up with. It's a
I love
great
alliteration. I can't resist.
Although there's I have to, we have to give credit to this, I actually don't know his name, this professor in Texas who came up with the Great Resignation.
I think that's lame. To me, that's just all he did was the '08 recession and then just move that. I feel like,
well, it was the Great Reset during COVID. I think he took the Great Reset and turned it into the Great Resignation.
I would have to say, I think it's a bit lazy, personally.
I think he's the University of Texas, so.
Don't at me, University of Texas. Do not at us. Just
Yeah.
because of that. It's not a personal attack. I know you guys don't have licenses and shit for guns anymore, so like, don't come after me. But yeah, Texas, don't at us.
I think you get a ticket if you don't carry a gun in Texas nowadays.
I think they just give it to you when you move there. They're just like, you're probably gonna need this now. So, but on that, the resignation revolution is underway. Oh my gosh, that article in New York Post about how everyone's rage quitting. I'm loving that. I'm loving it. Like, were you able to read all of that, or did you end up looking into that?
Yeah, I actually did not read that specific article. I saw the headline. There were so many articles on this topic, but the ones that I did read, it was like, hey, don't quit your job until you have another one. This one guy was thinking the whole thing was overrated. I think that was on NPR, which, that's generally good advice. You don't want to quit your job until you've got something else in hand. And it also, depends on, are you like more blue collar? Are you more white collar? Because a lot of the white collar jobs are, I don't think the resignation is as great from those because people have been working from home. I mean, the reasons that people are resigning are multiple. Obviously the big one is people working from home. They don't want to go back to the old grind, spending an hour each way driving. Some people actually miss the drive. And I read that there's like an optimal time for a commute. It's like 18 minutes or something like that. So that there's an actual barrier between work and home and a time to transition. But if you're working from home, and I've done this, I've done this where I was living in a loft downtown, and when I first started, everything was in the corner. So as soon as I walked in, there was no place I could be in the loft without seeing this pile of work constantly staring at me. And then it didn't take long for me to realize that I should basically build a little office in my loft with some half walls so I could walk past it without seeing it. Because when you're working from home, and this was 20 years ago, when you're working from home, it's just constantly staring you in the face unless you can close the door, have some sort of transition. But I don't know. Do you have a problem with that?
Not in that sense, because it's mostly just like a few notepads and a laptop. But I think it would be different if I had a different setup or I was a different sort of like work from homer. Like if I had to like watch the markets all day, I would need like 3 different screens and that kind of thing. And so that would probably annoy me. But in its current form, like, no, like I've been working from home for years, but like I would never, ever go back to an office full time again. Like I would rather eat my own hair than ever do that again. Like just a nightmare. And it's so wonderful and hilarious to me that so many other people are like, oh my God, I'm never doing this either. I think I was reading a stat, it was something like 40% of people said that if they had to go back to the office, they're just flat out quitting. And
Right.
like I was reading something of like people like somebody had like I think 6 coworkers quit in a day because they're all like, we're all going back to the office. And it was like, no, we're not. So it was just like a bunch of people all quit at once and stuff like that. So that's where I'm kind of like, like I know the data is all over, it's wonky, but are we looking at just the sort of clearing out of the pipes of the people that have been stuck at home and have been afraid, of course, for the past year and a half? And now we're seeing that pent up surge of like, I'm out of here, which is actually an optimal sign or sign of optimism. Or like, will that sort of correct out? Or are we actually looking at something way bigger than that? And that the data now we're gonna be looking back at this moment and going like, that was the point right there. And so I've got my thoughts on that. What do you think?
Yeah. So I think that we are at an inflection point. Things are not going to go back to the way they were before. And people are in a situation where they realize, like, why am I killing myself working way more than 40 hours a week? Like the only reason people were doing it pre-COVID is because that's
What
like
you did.
what you did. And, that on top of, basically wages not growing, people like, wait a second, I don't want to work 2, 3 jobs. I don't want to be working 60 hours a week. I want to spend time with my family. Like, what's the point? And, you look at some of these other countries, they think we're insane in the US for how much we work. But when everybody does it, it doesn't seem so insane. And I'm as guilty of it as anybody else, but I'm, got my own thing going. So it's not the job. I think a lot of people are, because of COVID, reassessing everything. And maybe some people that had plans to start a business, they're like, hey, this is it. Or my employer wants me to come back full time in my retail public facing job. And, but they're not taking the steps to protect my health, for whatever reason. So it's like, no, I'm taking the power back. I think the resignation revolution is real, and especially you look at the sort of the different age groups, the demographics. It's like there's the boomers retiring, and then there's the millennials, and then there's the Gen Zers, and the younger you go, the less they're willing to put up with. It's like, just because you guys did that doesn't mean I'm going to do that. And I kind of applaud them for that. And it's I think there's also a group of people who have maybe they sort of fell in like their high school job, and they just stayed there 10 years, 20 years, and it was kind of convenient, and maybe they grew with the position, or maybe they didn't, whatever. I think people like that are saying, wait a second, I used to want to do X, but I've just been doing Y because it was convenient, or it was here. Or, I read something about a person working at a dollar store, and a customer said, you know what, you should apply at our law office. So they did, and they got that job and got a $3 an hour bump in pay, like, overnight. It's like stuff like that where people they're capable of more, they're underutilized, and they're realizing their value, their worth. And what's crazy is your current job, your current boss, unless he's an amazing person, he or she is probably not going to tell you that we're underutilizing you. They're not looking out for your best interests. They're looking out for how you can make them look good. That's kind of the nature of the beast. It's not 100% of the time, but most of the time that's the case. So if there's nobody there to tell you, hey, you can do better, then we kind of end up settling. And, most of us have jobs and children and other stuff going on. So it requires extra effort to make a change. I don't know. I'll get off my soapbox now.
That's okay. I'll take your place there. Well, I think it's this huge, I definitely think it's the inflection point as well, where, I mean, $7.25 an hour as a minimum wage is utterly pathetic. Nobody can live on that. It's degrading. There's no dignity in that. And the more people vote with their feet and walk, the more power they have. And considering that, from my perspective, it seems like bosses really enjoy that degrading, like, you need this job, you need it. And if you don't, like, you're gonna literally be homeless and without food. And I think this is such a wonderful opportunity because people don't do their best work out of fear and desperation. People do their best work when they're happy and they want to be there and they're choosing to be there. Like, I've worked with coworkers where you're like, yeah, every single day you choose being here and it's awesome. And those are the people that create magic. And then there's the coworkers where you can obviously tell, like, they're just there for a paycheck. And so I think if employers can get away from this race to the bottom mentality, and this presents such a wonderful opportunity, if they can get away from that race to the bottom mentality and actually have employees who want to be there and are paid well, that they can go anywhere that they want, then that they're there because they want to be there. And so that's why I think that a 4-day work week combined with, like, minimum doubling the minimum wage, it should be about $24 to $25 an hour, but at minimum it should be 15. I think those two, if you, like, that point where those meet, I think it would be rocket fuel for the US economy if they would be able to change that mindset of, like, oh, you're poor, therefore you're morally bankrupt and you deserve this and you've done something to deserve this. I think that shift to choosing people who want to be there and paying them a dignified wage would just ignite the US economy.
Interesting. So, like, you're proposing a shift from 5 days to 4 days, and you're proposing an increase in the minimum wage. And it's like, I can hear the howls of despair, like, oh, it's gonna, like, my business is gonna shut down. But that happens every time, in my lifetime, every time there was a discussion about raising the minimum wage, people would complain about how it was going to drive them out of business. They'd have to shut down their business. But it never.
I do have to interject here. If your business is so poorly run that you need to rely on slave wages, you don't deserve to have a business. I don't go to the Porsche dealership and say, here's what I can afford to pay for the car. I want it. No, I can't afford it, so I can't have it. And so that, to me, if your business is structured so poorly, you shouldn't be a business owner. Sorry to interject, but continue.
I like that. I agree. And the fact of the matter is, and I don't have any studies at hand, but I've read that it's kind of the opposite. Like, you raise these wages and your people are happier and they stay and they do all the stuff you were talking about earlier. It's like they're happy to support their employer and they will go further and, endure. If there's rough times, they'll endure because you've done right by them, as opposed to grinding them down. So I would love to see that, the $15 minimum wage take hold. I think it's happening across, some states, but I don't know federally if it's going to happen. And then, there's some people who say instead of a 4-day work week, it could be a shorter work day. I think it was in Norway or Finland.
Norway or Spain. did it, and then Norway did a test, and then Scotland is doing one as well.
But on a 5-hour workday?
They're the government subsidizing businesses that move to a 4-day work week, but then some of them are just shortening the hours.
Right, right. And it, I guess there's some unintended side effects from that, where it's like, oh, if you have a 5-hour workday, then people, like, they don't take any breaks. They just crank for 5 hours straight and then go home, which people are focused and more productive, and then they get out. And I've seen the other side of that, where people, some cultures, we've talked about this, it's like some people stay late and they screw around all day to end up, to then work late and send emails at 7 or 8 p.m. And that's like applauded or rewarded by management. It's like ridiculous. You could get the same amount of work done in 4 hours instead of 10, but it's the screwed up culture. So,
well, that was also one of the studies that was in that article I sent you, was that the one company in particular that switched to a 4-day work week, they actually noticed that non-work related website usage dropped 35%. And that was people, scheduling the plumber. Oh crap, I've got to find, somebody to clean the gutters. And it's all that stuff that we all have to do, because from 9 to 5, you're changed to your desk in the office. And then you have to go home and do your chores and do your grocery shopping at 8 o'clock at night. Like, not everybody can do that. And so they found that, like, people weren't scrambling. They weren't secretly taking work home. It was a lot of the BS that we all come to accept as normal, like the social things and the like little happy hours and stuff at the office. Those were the first things purged. And I mean, hallelujah for that. And so if you eliminate the useless meetings that are for somebody's ego, and the, little social things that are just a nuisance and annoying, people are actually able to get a lot more work done. And so that, as much as people want to be like, oh my God, we're going to all be like rushing and zooming around, like, not at all. It's just, you can now have time for the rest of your life. You can take up that yoga class. You can go, if you're taking night school or something, like, you can accelerate that. So there's all these other different things that you can do, as opposed to, I've got a 3-hour window at night after my job and my commute, what can you do?
Right. And so people have been working from home and realizing what they've been missing, and are reluctant to give that up. And yeah, so I think, the shorter work day or the shorter work week, or my preference, the shorter work day and the shorter work week.
There it is.
Yeah, it's the government paying the difference, that's just not going to fly in the US. I mean, if it's good for business, and like, if they can pay less, lower labor costs and achieve the same results, then yeah.
Well, there was a trucking company mentioned in that article where they ended up, like, so they still paid people for 40 hours a week, but they only worked 30 hours a week. And they actually found that productivity and everything went up, that they actually had to hire more people because business was booming in a pandemic. And so all the propaganda that has been taught over the years of like, oh my God, it's going to like destroy the job market, it isn't accurate. Like, all of the data about raising the minimum wage is positive. Like, all the data about shortening the work week is positive. Like, the naysayers and the doomsday, that's this very knee-jerk emotional thinking that just isn't supported by the data. And so I think this is such a wonderful opportunity for businesses to actually look at the tangible data and make choices based on that, as opposed to conjecture, which is what everything for the past several decades has been about. I think people will go on welfare. I think people will drink all day if they have an extra day off. No, dude, they're not. Like, they're going to go visit their grandma in the old folks home, like, no.
Sure. Well, you think about it, it's the 8-hour workday came about, I think it was Henry Ford. So he could have 3 8-hour shifts cranking out Model Ts around the clock. I mean,
business boomed.
What's that?
Yes, business boomed, but 40 hours at the time was actually less than the norm. But what's funny is that the usual workday used to be 60 to 70 hours, but thanks to technology, it was able, like farming and stuff like that, it was able to then become 40 hours a week. And so that's where we have enough technology now that we could easily move to a 4-day week, easily. Most jobs, I mean, obviously something like retail or whatever is slightly different in that sense, but thanks to all the tech and automation advances that we've had, I mean, in the 1930s, John Maynard Keynes was predicting about a 15-hour work week. And is that insane?
It depends. Yeah, so there's that whole meaning thing. Like a lot of people get meaning from their work.
Mm-hmm.
Is 15 hours a week enough to derive that meaning?
Apparently 10 hours was about the magic number for that, when they looked at the data of like how people feel, like if they felt like yeah, I did my job, like the esteem that they get from their job, it was about 10 to 15 hours a week. And that was enough to give people that like oomph of like, I'm doing my job and I'm being a productive worker. So other things, it can be redirected into other things, but like that doesn't mean that people are only going to work 10 hours a week by any means.
Sure. Yeah, I can see we're being inundated by viewers. Feel free to type a question into the chat if you'd like to contribute or take part in this conversation.
Let's have a look.
Yeah. I mean, we're kind of going off on a tangent here. It's like shorter work week, shorter work day, but people are rage quitting. People are reevaluating their lives. People are sort of, it's almost like waking up from a coma, kind of like, wait a second, what's happening here? Because I mean, it's very much when you're in the 9 to 5, Monday through Friday grind, back and forth, taking the train, sitting in traffic, you like kind of enter into a I don't want to say a meditative state, more like a zoned out state, where you can go through the whole day and you're just like going through the motions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's why we're, on this planet. You know what I'm saying? But you gotta like, to some people it's just a job. To other people it's their, life's pursuit. So I think the people, there are some people who derive their meaning outside of work, in which case maybe they'll just keep, it doesn't really matter to them,
I think so, but I think it's so baked into American culture that your work is your identity, or at least North American culture, that like your work is your identity. And I think a lot of people are going to have that like, oh my God, now who am I? Because, if I can't preen around being the CEO and I actually have to like be a regular person doing things, it's way less fun, I think, for a lot of people. And it makes sense that they would want to maintain the status quo of that because it's great. Like I can see why all the boomers want to go back to the office, because they get to be king of the castle. Like, yeah, I'd want to go back to the office too. If I were, in the fancy corner office and I had the parking spot with my name on it, like, yeah, I'd probably be pushing to go to the office more. And so again, that just highlights disparities between generations, attitudes towards work, and like what the future of work will ultimately end up looking like. Because the people who are desperately trying to get back to the office are retiring in droves. So it's not sustainable.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I know of some organizations that are like looking at the return to work, their strategy or return to office as, instead of having people commute in from where they were pre-COVID, they're actually considering sort of like maybe pods that are located closer to clusters of their employees, so they can have that, rubbing elbow experience, which, say what you like about the, the social stuff. Some people like us who are, have been self-employed or work from home, it doesn't mean that much to them. But a lot of employees, if you have an organization, the culture is super important. Well, how do you build a culture? you kind of have to do stuff as a group and communicate values and mission and principle repeatedly. Now that can be done over Zoom, but it's harder to have hallway conversations and water cooler conversations, which
I don't think
reinforce
that's
that.
necessarily a bad thing though, because that's where all the office politics are gone when everyone's working from home, because it's no longer, that guy again, chatting the CEO up in the hallway and like those little conversations that go on, the petty little things. Oh, somebody took my lunch, and now it becomes, an HR thing. And like all of those things are gone when everyone's working from home, so that you can now be intentional about what that culture looks like. Like for me, if I would never ever go to another trade show again, I would die happy. But instead of being the marketing person that had to go stand at the trade show, if we could instead of kill all the trade shows because they're insanely expensive and like barely any value, I'd rather go to an all-inclusive work thing twice a week or twice a year with my coworkers. If the company paid for us to go on holiday to an all-inclusive in like Mexico or something, we would do like a work retreat for a week. I would absolutely love that, because that would be something where I actually was like, yeah, cultures, we have the memory, we have the inside jokes, we're getting work done, we're strategizing, like doing all those things, as opposed to standing at a booth, handing t-shirts out to people. Like it just doesn't have the same effect. And I think if corporations are able to spend their money on things and get creative and actually, I guess, stamp down the ego, then I think there's a lot of possibility.
Well, trade shows and retreats are two wildly different things with wildly different purposes. And it's, and I've done both. And, having to stand on your feet all day in a booth in a conference center in Vegas is, it's not, some people actually thrive on it. But it was a chore, no doubt about it for me. But the people streaming by, taking all your trinkets while, trying to avoid giving you their, ID or it's, I don't know how necessary it is, but I have noticed that trade shows online, now those are a complete waste of time. They like Comdex or whatever. It's just, I think a lot of it has to do with the physical proximity. And, there's some people that I would only see once a year at these shows in Vegas. And they were friends of mine it was more than just Vegas, but it was that kind of relationship. So it's different from a retreat, and there's different kinds of meetings, so
for sure. But I think the usual office, especially, going back to the fact that like every office was an open office, and that was such a nightmare, because then it just becomes like a live Slack channel. Everyone's talking, everyone's doing this, there's constant distractions, somebody walks by, this and that. I think if we can kill open offices, there'll be a greater chance of people being productive or embrace it more. And then the office just becomes the social hub. Because that kind of is how an office, like that's how I would sort of look at, you're in the office, like it's sort of social time as opposed to sit down and work, because how can you when you're in an open office and you have to concentrate and everyone's like tooling around and stuff like that? Like you just can't get anything done.
So I wonder if that's part of the, great resignation revolution. People they know that when they're in the office, X% of time is spent socializing, whether they want to or not. And then now they've been working from home for over a year, and they get so much more work done, and they get so much more time with their family. And then it's like, wait a second, now you want me to come back in where I'm going to not be able to do as much work during the day, which means, but now my output is higher, over the last year. So I'm expected to generate the same amount of output, but now you're adding on this social requirement that's going to suck up my time. And I know myself, it's like, I'm usually on the phone or on Zoom during the day. And if I need like to do deep work with no interruptions, it's after hours.
Hmm.
And I put on headphones and
Hmm.
I don't do it at home because I can't. I have to do it here. And that's, that kind of sucks. It'd be nice to do it during the day.
Well,
And
and also for folks who are in the creative field, sometimes you don't have the creative spurt from 9 to 5. And like there'll be times where it's like, I've got to try to fit, I've got to try to write whatever for the marketing campaign. And you're trying to fit it in little half-hour slots between idiotic meetings, stupid social things, dumb crap. So you're sitting there and you're like, I haven't written more than 3 sentences because you can't sort of sit down and like, okay, let's like marinate, or you're into a groove and you're writing, you're doing something. And then it's like, ding, oh, I've got to go to a meeting. Oh, so-and-so's birthday. And if I don't go, now it becomes an office politics thing. If I'm like, oh, sorry, like I'm in the middle of something. And that whole thing just becomes its own beast. And so like for somebody like me, who's more like in the creative sphere, sometimes it's just, I'll be sitting there drinking my morning coffee, still in my jammies. And it's like, I can then bang out 600 words and I even surprised myself, but that was just a like quick, like, it was just, you're in the zone. And those moments were so incredibly few and far between in-house that now it's almost laughable. I mean, it's probably different for folks like such as yourself who are more like comp sci, but definitely for the creative people, like you can't plan and schedule your creative hours.
my creative hours are predictably between like 9 p.m. and 2 a.m.
Yeah, so that's totally useless. You were totally useless to an in-house person.
Right. And so, I can sort of structure my day as it works for me. So I generally don't try not to have meetings before 10 because I'm usually up late and, it's usually it's at home, but sometimes I need to, I'll be in the office. But yeah, if that's probably my biggest concern about, a regular day job is having to conform. So maybe can I pre-quit if I have to take a job? Can I quit before I start?
Don't show them this video, then you'll be okay.
Hey, Johannes's creative hours are from 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. So
See, that's useful. All right, Johannes, you're going in-house. Congratulations. Go get your bag. You're going off to war.
Well, he's an academician, so that comes with the territory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Thanks,
exactly.
thanks for the comment. That's great. So, but to that point, like you mentioned rage quitting. Do you think someone who rage quits, it like feels good in the moment, but then they go home and it's like, oh, what have I done? I don't, most people don't have more than a month or two of savings. So unless you've planned in advance to rage quit, you kind of put yourself in a sticky situation, in a pickle. And also, do you think it actually has any impact on like their employers? Are they gonna say, gosh, he wasn't happy, maybe we should change things? What do you think?
I get what you're saying about like when the sugar rush wears off, are you like, oh my God, what have I done? But then most people can get very creative and very resourceful when their back's against the wall. And that's why this job market's fantastic. And that like the articles I was reading, it was like next day after rage quitting, she had 2 interviews, So there's, I think, a freedom and that sort of like mental space. And then, sorry, what was the second question you had?
Well, there was the rage quitting, and maybe it's, it feels good in the moment, but then also the effect, whoever they're quitting from. Do you think it changes behavior? Like,
I think if it's more than one, then it's just an outlier and you can write that person off as unstable and crazy and say all the negative things about that person. But when you're having, if you've had 6 people rage quit in a month, you need to get a mirror and examine your corporate culture, your company, everything about that. And so people rage quitting is a gift to employers because it's that huge and utter red flag of like, you guys need to check yourselves before you wreck yourselves, in the immortal words of Ice Cube. But will corporations take that gift and do something with it is another question. But no, I think it's important. I think employers need to have more of it. Like, I love seeing all those fast food signs are like, we're closed. Nobody pays us a living wage and we don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah.
Like, if there be 10 times more of those, then suddenly, like when, the CEO of whatever drives up to McDonald's and can't get something because it's closed, then suddenly it becomes a problem. And
Sure.
so we need more of that, more rage quitting and more just flat out people walking off the job.
Yeah. What was was it a Wendy's where like the entire crew just walked out and said?
There were a few of them. There were many different brands. Like, there were ones where I've seen where, like, if you want more wages, you quit one McDonald's franchise and go to the other and they'll pay you more. So it's like, who wouldn't do that?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's the case also in, corporate America, at least from what I've seen on the software side. It's people who have been at a company for a number of years. Usually that career ladder it's blocked until somebody leaves above them, and then they may or may not get the job. But multiple times I've seen people like quit, leave the company, go somewhere else, and then a few years later come back at a much higher level. So it's a bit of a strategy. I don't know if they knew that was going to happen at the time, but I've also seen people who couldn't stand their boss, so they would quit, go to another company, and then the old company buys the company they moved to, and they end up working for their old boss again, which is I don't know. It just seems kind of it shouldn't be this way. I don't know what you call, that's not rage quitting. I guess that's just bad boss avoidance.
Well, I think employers, or like the future of work, like employers in the future of work, I think are going to be stunned, and they shouldn't be, because this is foreshadowing. They're going to be stunned by the level of resentment that's out there. It's that, like, frontline workers, everybody. It's that, like, you left me to deal with insane customers. You did a big splashy PR campaign about how you were giving us hazard pay and then didn't, or took it away, or made sure that we couldn't sue you, or wouldn't give us this, wouldn't give us that. And now you expect loyalty from us? Like, no. Like, employers have no skin in the game, and yet they expect employees to be in the arena fighting a lion. And they're over at the concession stand while their employees are fighting in the arena, and they don't see a problem with that. And so I think they're going to be stunned by the resentment, and there's going to be more of this, of the, like, why should we? Like, you left us out there to die. You let us, like, how many staff at supermarkets and stuff like that have been shot and assaulted by customers just because they wouldn't wear a mask? Well, why the hell would I put my life on the line for $7 an hour and in a pandemic, and my employer isn't protecting me and doesn't have my back? Like, no, sir, I will not be here.
They're not going to spring for security guard. Yeah. Or I heard a story today, a guy working in a restaurant in San Diego, it was when they were able to start seating customers, he would once a day have an argument with someone who wouldn't wear a mask. And then eventually he caught COVID and took it home to his family. It's like, screw this. He quit. He's like, I'm not putting up with this anymore. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It really, employers should take better care of their employees. That's just kind of obvious to me.
Well, that's a corporate culture situation, but it reminds me of what Alfred Marshall said, of like, highly paid labor isn't dear labor. Like, it's good to pay people well because you get fantastic output for it. And so there's this, like, I'm going to pay you less and less to motivate you, but it has the inverse effect because it just creates resentment, makes people hate you, and makes them not care and dig in. Like, if I were, the fast food employee and somebody showed up with a napkin that had free fries scrawled on it, I'd honor it, because why not? Like, I don't care. Like, I really don't care. You don't care about me? Yeah, sure. Free fries. Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah. What? Like, I don't care. And then they're like, shocked Pikachu face, like, oh my God, like we value our employees and it's a family here. What? Yeah.
Heard that one before.
Yeah. That usually means we're going to psychologically ruin you. Like, that's code for that. But
Mm-hmm.
at least
So there's one line of thought that says people change jobs in good labor markets, but nobody, wanted to do it during the COVID lockdown. So there might be pent up demand for people, like people that didn't quit. Now it's like, doubling up more than normal. I wonder if that's, but then and also because they're thinking, well, there's the job market's tight, and there's all this money that's been sort of flooded into the economy by the government. So now's a good time to jump. So maybe that's what's causing it instead of just rage. And I don't know. I usually there's it's the scarcity mindset. It's like a fixed pie and it's a zero sum game. Like I have to get mine, which means you're not going to get yours. Oh, well, as opposed to growth mindset, which is the pie gets bigger and, which is the reality just through trade and the economy. We all know this, yet some people still have that scarcity mindset. Do you think this pandemic job market has liberated workers from this scarcity mindset?
Yeah, especially because after 08, there was like a palpable fear of, we're all screwed. Grab the life raft. You're Leo in Titanic, like you better hang on tight. And you are so lucky to have a job, you piece of garbage. Like you're lucky we let you show up here. And I mean, as somebody who graduated directly into the 08 recession, like it was worse than anybody could have imagined. And now there's a pandemic to deal with for round 2 of that. And so I think now it's just that like, okay, so after the first once in a lifetime recession, there was definitely a scarcity mindset and fear, whereas now throw in a pandemic and that had a lot of people reevaluating things, but also what people don't want to have to say out loud is how many of the frontline workers are dead. Like in particular line cooks, because they're stuck in the back and there's no ventilation and they're in close quarters. Like there were hundreds of thousands of like chefs and stuff and retail workers and cooks and stuff that are dead. And so now that all of those are opening back up again, so we're seeing that where it's like, boom, yeah, suddenly everyone's hiring, but now there's fewer people to fill those jobs because they died. And so that's just like after the plague, that's going to increase wages for peasants, aka the rest of us. And that, since restaurants are the new manufacturing jobs, that's pretty much, I think that's partially the uptake that we're seeing. But that nobody wants to have the awkward part of like, a lot of people are dead. And I think that has affected the scarcity mindset, and that it's like, well, why do I want to be doing this? Like, why do I want to be killing myself for a boss who literally doesn't care whether I live or die?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you just made me realize that I've never seen any analysis on the over 600,000 Americans who died. Like, who were they? What were their jobs?
A lot of them were frontline workers. And that's the context that I can imagine would be particularly uncomfortable for some folks to want to have to deal with. But
yeah, Johannes just asked the same question. Do you have any stats on COVID mortality by occupation? That would be a great study.
I saw something, I don't remember enough to quote anybody, but I remember at the time being like, oh my God, because it was all like retail and food. And so that was something where it was like, oh, and that's also another interesting thing with, again, the intersection of automation of those were the jobs that they've been threatening are going to be automated. Okay, great. So now the higher wages might carry people through into the next version of what the automation will be.
That's gnarly. Yeah, that's I think we might need to do an episode on that in its entirety. Requires
Yeah.
some
So,
research. Maybe Johannes would want to join us for that one.
oh God, absolutely. Jump on the bus. But the other, I think what we're looking at here for the future of work, I think this is going to be the kickoff for like the freelance revolution, like independent contractors freelance, because like what benefit is there to go in-house?
Hasn't
Nothing.
it already started? I mean, that's what, Fiverr and all these Upwork and like, hasn't that already started?
I mean more in the like the free agent, like the CEO free agent, the CMO free agent, the consultant free agent of the, like if I'm a consultant and you want me to show up at your office 5 days a week, I'm going to laugh you out of town, because why do I need to drive 45 minutes to go appear in your office so that you think I'm working?
Yeah.
Like that kind of, so I think there's going to be a lot of people that are like, why would I do that? I can just remote consult for like 10 different companies and not have, and like fit it to my life. And so that's, I think we're looking at the super professional version of that.
Yes, I think you're right. And there has been a move to fractional, like fractional CEOs, fractional CFOs, basically who, just as you described, multiple clients, but they play that role. And, oftentimes the client doesn't need a full-time CFO, maybe just, 20% of the time. And the rest is by an accountant or a bookkeeper. So
like, especially because we love success stories about people starting companies in garages on their kitchen table. Well, why can't I build a unicorn from my living room? Like, why can't I,
You can. But I don't know, like freelancer, independent contractor, that's usually, and it's a great, I did it for many years. It's, I kind of like it because you have to stay sharp and you have to live by your wits. And if you don't deliver, you don't get paid, which can be, let's just say some salaried jobs are, people skate, they don't have to perform and they still get that paycheck. So that's like
there's a sharpness that doesn't exist in jobs like government employees, where they have no skin in the game and they have such job security. Whereas compared to people like you and me, like everything is about the quality of my work, how I deal with people, my reputation. Like I'm in the arena fighting a lion, as are you, because like I enjoy living indoors and eating, and I'm the one that does that. It's not because I get to go and social loaf at the office all day and get a paycheck. Like it's my reputation, it's my quality work, it's things like that. And so there's a hunger to that exists in people that doesn't exist in jobs where they have such insane job security that they can't possibly fathom what it's like. Like look, for example, at early in COVID when they were trying to figure out benefits and stuff like that for people. So you've got people in government jobs that have the cushiest benefits, the cushiest everything, that are trying to determine what appropriate benefits are for small business owners and entrepreneurs. Are you kidding me? You might as well have a blind person paint a wall for you. They, like, no fault of their own, they can't do it. They just don't have the awareness. And so that again goes back to the who has skin in the game. What does the future of work look like if those people are creating policies and bailouts? Because that, like, all the businesses that went under didn't have to if that had been better structured. If they had an entrepreneur in there who was like, I know exactly what it's like to be down in the trenches. Here's what a package from the government would look like that would allow me to coast through. Like it's that. And so again, that goes back to the hunger. It's the same as, it sounds horrible, but like part of the reason I enjoy working with single women in particular compared to married women is because there's a hunger there that doesn't exist when you've got a husband who's bringing home a paycheck as well. So there just isn't that kind of urgency to it and that I think extends to the entrepreneur mindset and everything as well.
Sure. Yeah. Oh man. It's a whole nother conversation. Well, it looks like if you check the chat, Johannes is fully in support of you making a move to fractional CMO. I think that's what he's supporting.
Hey man, send all jobs my way. I'll be a fractional CMO.
There you go. Yeah, it's very true. I have had multiple experiences where, an invoice was submitted and a month went by, another month went by, and it's like, okay, I have to like get to in front of the accounts payable person, and it's like, oh, we'll cut it next week. It's like, come on, you're killing me here. Mm-hmm. They felt no urgency because they were getting their paycheck.
Yeah, they don't care at all. It's just like, oh, what do you mean? And especially like if you were single and there's nobody else bringing home a paycheck, it's that like, no, dude, like this is like, I need this money. It isn't the same thing. And so again, that goes back to the hunger. And so that's where like, it feels like people are hungry again in a way that they haven't been in a really long time. And I think that's amazing for the future of work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's definitely a huge reshuffling going on. I think there's going to be more independent contractors, hanging out their shingle saying, this is what I do, hire me. So it's an extension of the gig economy, which, that's here to stay, but this is more career oriented. I think, I don't think people are looking to, make career out of DoorDash delivering food or Uber or Lyft. Usually it's like retired people or students, something to do. But I think that this is probably going to turn into a movement of sorts. Mm-hmm. People are quitting and they're not going to look to be an employee again. They're just not. They're going to do their own thing. And as Johannes says, build a unicorn. Mm-hmm. Or not. It could just be, look, I just want to have control of my life when I do what I do and where, and take vacations when I choose, and maybe for the same amount of pay. It's more work when you're self-employed, but it's also a lot more freedom. So,
well, and there's nothing wrong with the type of employee who is happy to show up on time, does all the things they need to do, but wants to pick up their bag and leave at 5.
Absolutely.
Like, great. Like if you like the person who wants to clock in and clean whatever and leave at 5 and not take their work home, like fantastic, great, where, wonderful, sign up here, like we need people like that. And it is never to denigrate those type of people because they're absolutely necessary, but they deserve a living wage. They deserve to live in dignity, like those type of things. And so that, I think, if the future of work would be able to actually see value, like I hate the term low skilled labor because it isn't, a lot of these people have skills the rest of us can't do, like putting a bunch of bed sheets on a bed or cleaning the fast food machine or whatever, at the store, like that kind of stuff. Like there is skill to these jobs that hasn't really been realized. And I think when we're able to put a bit more respect on that and let those people, like, you want to leave at 5 o'clock, great. And then be able to give them the resources they need to live comfortably. And then if other people want to do other things, great, like go do it.
Sure. And it's sort of like extends to the notion that, maybe everybody doesn't need to go to college.
Yeah.
It's which when I was growing up, I would have been killed if I didn't.
Yeah, same. But like we were raised by boomers. And so that was the difference, is that like, because I remember like as an old millennial, like I remember there was the huge push at the time, like trades were bad, they were evil. And then shocker, after about 10 years, it was like, oh wait, we're a shortage for plumbers, shortage for welders, shortage for all these things. Cause yeah, they made such a concerted effort to pipeline all of us into university, that all of the trades, and I mean, they make good money, and that all of the trades, there was like, tumbleweed, because they had marketed college and university as being the only choice. And so that's something where that's that old school boomer mentality that I think is dying out.
Yeah. So I hope we haven't offended our audience member, the professor. Yeah, but it's true. I think it's all tied together. So yes. How do we sum up this conversation in the few minutes we have remaining?
I think corporate culture in the future of work is about to get very different. And I think it's going to be a lot of things. It's a very umbrella kind of idea. There's going to be a lot under that, but I think corporate culture is going to have to change, and the employers who get it will get the best pick of talent and generally the best of everything. And the ones that are slow to adopt will die.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and we've all now come to realize you can interview people on Zoom, and you can interview people, and it doesn't matter where the people are. So the base of available talent, it was kind of obvious now, offshoring and using virtual assistants. I mean, that was all there before, but now it's like in front of everyone's face. And you don't have to live in San Francisco to have a high-tech job. You don't have to be, it's people are moving out of the country and keeping their jobs because they can be remote. But there's a difference. I wish we had a little more time. There's a difference between, like, if you've been someplace and then COVID hit and you're starting to work from home. But if you join a new company now and you're onboarded, yet nobody's in the office, and you're kind of like on Zoom all day, it can be hard to be, how do you get integrated with the team, when you're just working from home? That's a whole new issue.
Well, that puts the impetus on corporate to reinvent and reimagine their communication, how they run their culture. Like, you can do those things, but it's more work for them. And it was so much easier to throw a box of donuts on the counter in the break room and say, look, we're having a social, whereas now there has to be a lot more planning and thought and creativity that goes into it, which is not a bad thing. Yeah,
true. Okay, well, so if somebody can create a killer app to build remote culture remotely, maybe Chris Dyer, our previous guest who wrote a book on remote work, that might be something for him.
Yeah.
Probably a combination of tools. So I know of one group that actually sends out like a bottle of wine or a 6-pack of beer so that everybody can do a remote happy hour with the alcohol. Yeah, why not? Sure. Okay. Well, Kirsten, we're out of time. This has been a good conversation, and I'm wondering if we ever need to get any more guests. I think this might be better because you're just so compelling.
I know.
Yeah, I'm glad you're aware. Okay, well, let's wrap it up. I'd like to thank everyone for watching. I think we're gonna break LinkedIn with the volume.
I know the traffic, man, it's brutal here. Like, come on, save some for the rest of the internet.
But next week, that's the Thursday before July 4th. So
it's Canada Day.
Canada Day, really?
Yeah, of course you guys don't know it's Canada Day, but we know July 4th. But yeah, it's Canada Day. So think about wear white and red and think about Canada.
I will. I'll have some maple syrup on my pancakes.
I was going to say Molson Canadian, but that beer is terrible. So do not do that. So.
You guys still have Labatt's up there?
We do.
Molson Brador. I remember that from college. That stuff was good.
I thought they merged or something. Obviously, you can tell I'm a huge beer drinker because I don't know this, but like I thought they merged. I could be wrong. Again, don't at me, anybody.
Yeah, no, I'm not much of a beer drinker anymore. Too old for that stuff. Okay, well, thank you, Kristen. This has been great, and we'll see everybody next week.
All right, till next time. Have a wonderful, wonderful week.